This is Qtv News. I am Marietu Sidibe and thanks for joining us. First, the main local, international and sports news headlines. President Adama Barrow today presided over the swearing-in of the newly appointed Minister of Youth and Sports, together with the new Ombudsman and 4 senior members of the judiciary. The Q Group Foundation, in support of a successful and safe reopening of schools, today handed over a check for $1 million to the Ministry of Education. The Permanent Secretary 1 at the Ministry of Lands has told the National Assembly Select Committee on Local Government and Lands that his ministry has been involved in mediating between persons involved in land issues, resulting in peaceful solutions. A representative from the Global Criminal Justice, who is also the US's ambassador at large for war crimes issues, has held talks with officials of the Victim Center on how to create an accountability mechanism to deal with those identified for prosecution by the TRRC. In international news, in a debate watched by millions of viewers, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris on Wednesday came face to face in what is the only scheduled vice presidential debate. As crimes against migrants continue to take a toll in Libya, a Nigerian man was soaked with petrol and burnt to death by some Libyan men. And in sports, barely a year into its existence, the manager of the Gambia amputee football team, Bob Jabi, says his team is aiming high to represent the country at competitions. And Ugandan runner Joshua has claimed his second amazing world record of this year on a night which also saw Ethiopia's Letse Sembet write herself into the record books at a track meet in Spain. Now, the local news in detail. The newly appointed Minister of Youth and Sports, Bakari Baji, together with the new ombudsman and 4 senior members of the judiciary, were sworn in on Thursday at the State House, presided over by President Adama Barrow. As Aliusise reports, the Gambian leader says party politics must not undermine national interest and institutions.
The new appointees all took the prescribed oaths of office, allegiance and secrecy. They are Bakari Baji, Minister of Youth and Sports, Justice Awaba and Justice Idrissa Fafambai, judges of the Supreme Court, Justice Umar Modu Musa Njai, President of the Court of Appeal, Aissatou Diallo, Judicial Secretary, and Bakari K. Sanyang, Ombudsman. As he congratulates and thanks the new appointees for accepting to serve their country, President Barrow says the latest appointment form part of his government's continued search for Gambians who can contribute towards the strengthening of the governance structures and the realization of the national goals.
The appointment of these Gambians clearly shows that, as Gambian citizens, we have a lot of work to do together in order to achieve our national objectives and targets through our various institutions.
His government, President Barrow says, will never lose sight of its pledge to undertake relevant institutional and legal reforms in accordance with global standards and best practice.
We must not allow politics to overshadow our national interests or undermine our institutions. With this in mind, let us work together, for it is the surest way of building appropriate systems that work for all. Individuals may come and go, but the institutions stay.
Bakari Baji, the new Minister of Youth and Sports and a highly respected youth leader, while thanking the President for the confidence bestowed on him, promises to work in the interest of the country. Baji replaces Hadame Sidibe.
I am an optimist and I am full of hope about the future of this country. There are going to be challenges, we will make mistakes, and we will have obstacles as we strive to change and attain excellence in sports and in youth empowerment. However, I am hopeful that Your Excellency will help guide and provide the support that is needed as we journey together to develop this country and its young people.
Justice Awaba, on behalf of our colleagues, says the judiciary has registered enormous development under the current dispensation, saying a highly respected judiciary is key to mastering democracy.
We thank His Excellency for his commitment to the independence of the judiciary and thereby ensuring that the judiciary of the Gambia regains its hitherto lost glory. I shall, however, hasten to add that in the midst of all these milestones, the challenges are ever visible, and we continue to urge upon His Excellency the President of the Republic and the government as a whole to continue to give the judiciary of the Gambia the readily needed support if we want to achieve and maintain an exemplary judiciary.
Chief Justice Hassan B. Jallow says the new appointment will improve the court system.
Now be able to have more than one panel in the Supreme Court, because we have an increase of judges, local judges, from 5 to 7. It also means that when the Supreme Court exercises its jurisdiction to review its previous decisions, which requires a panel of 7 judges, we now have a complement of 7 Gambian judges who can undertake that. And there will be no need then to co-opt judges from the Court of Appeal, practice which in the past tended to disrupt the work of that court.
It is hoped that the appointees will live by their oaths taken as they serve in their different capacities for the progress and development of the country and the people. Reporting for Qtv News, I am Aliou Cissé.
The Q Group Foundation, in support of the reopening of schools, today handed over a check for $1 million to the Ministry of Education to contribute to a successful and safe return to schools for students. QTV's Momodu Lamin Choi was at the event and he now reports.
Last Monday's announcement from the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education of the reopening of schools was accompanied by a national call for everyone to give their support for a successful and safe reopening of schools. The Q Group Foundation has become one of the first to heed that call and take a swift response to address the needs of the ministry by contributing a check for $1 million. Present at this handing over ceremony are senior management of the Q Group and the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. The Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education describes the donation as a continuous support emerging from the long-existing partnership between the Q Group and the Education Ministry.
Our students have lost about 252 contact hours out of the 880 contact hours. So your support is going to help them not only in going back to school, but also in the catch-up or the regain of the lost contact hours. And we are very grateful for that.
The reopening of schools will see more than 700,000 students, representing 1/3 of the Gambia's population, who have stayed home for long and lost a significant number of contact hours due to coronavirus restrictions. The restrictions have had a socio-economic impact on the lives of hundreds of thousands of Gambians, including students, disaster victims, and the less privileged in society, some of whom the Q Group Foundation had given support to in the areas of health, education, and socio-economic needs. The executive director of the Q Group Foundation explains the rationale behind today's donation.
We are very pleased to hear that MOPSI, under the advice of the Ministry of Health and other development partners, has taken the bold step of reopening schools to accord our children the same opportunity that other children around the world have to continue learning. However, we are cognizant of the delicacy of this matter and the need to take the necessary precautionary measures to ensure that our children and teachers return to schools in a safe environment in order to prevent further spread of this deadly virus. Therefore, we are here to lend our support to MOPSI so that schools will be reopened in the safest way possible by providing our students and teachers with the necessary sanitary equipment like masks, thermometers, soaps, etc., so that we can be assured that our children and our teachers are safe in the schools.
The Q Group Foundation is completely sponsored through the Q Group's 12 companies, most of whose staff are almost 100% Gambians and products of our education system. The chairman of the Q Group renews the foundation's commitment towards supporting the education sector. He refers to this donation as an inspiration for all Gambians to support the education ministry during its time of needs.
Today we decided to bring along the television because we believe that the ministry needs more support. So we are just bringing out the first check, but I'm calling on all Gambians to come out and support the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. I think we are all anxious for our kids to go back to school. If you look at the reports in all the media, whether it's parents, whether it's teachers, where everybody wants the schools to open. And we know what it takes for us to make sure that our kids are safe.
The Minister of Basic and Secondary Education points out the smooth and progressive partnership between her ministry and the Q Group, which during times of need has always been forthcoming in supporting basic and secondary education for national development. The minister also presents a certificate of appreciation to the Q Group for their continued support to her ministry.
Today you're here, you've come, answering our call in support of the reopening of schools in a big way, in a very special way. It's not anything surprising because you've done it before. The relationship has been a long-standing one. And any relationship, they say, that continues is a true relationship. A friend in need is a friend indeed, as was reiterated by my permanent secretary.
The Q Group Foundation was established in 2016 as a philanthropic arm of the Q Group to support needy individuals and complement national development. Prior to its establishment, among other forms of intervention, the Q Group had supported the education sector in 2010 with a $10 million investment, part of which a spelling bee was organized, similar initiatives of which the Q Group Foundation plans to reintroduce for students. Mahmoud Lamin Choy, Qtv News.
The Permanent Secretary 1 at the Ministry of Lands has told the National Assembly Select Committee on Local Government and Lands that his ministry has been involved in mediating between people involved in land issues, resulting in peaceful negotiations despite court rulings ordering evictions. More in this report.
The PS was responding to questions from the Select Committee on land-related troubles in the country, with a special focus on the Salaji, Old Yundum and Brufut land problems. The meeting was requested by the Select Committee on Local Government and Lands to get an explanation on the latest happenings regarding land issues. To clear their doubts, the Permanent Secretary 1 at the Ministry of Lands, Buba Sanyang, began by explaining in detail how they came to solve the issue of the Brufut land saga. According to Mr. Sanyang, after a thorough investigation involving all parties, they found out the disputed land belongs to the Bojankunda family and they had no choice but to return it to them.
The area belonged to the Bojankundas. And the state didn't hesitate. We returned the land back to the Bojankundas. And this has been the only crime that the state has committed because people feel that we should give it to the village. And I think you will all agree with me that in as much as the village might need the place, if the owners claim for it, we have no right to give it to the village on top of the owners, because they own their property.
On to highlight that the issue of the land troubles in the country is not only handled or decided by the ministry, as they now refer people to the Land Commission, who he said are independent.
So when people come to us, we will refer them to the Land Commission. Land Commission is an independent body. We are not together because as a ministry, we are administering land. In the process, if we go wrong, if we are part of the Land Commission, then it will be difficult to solve that problem. So that's why them being independent can also review what we have judged on, and then also advise or even put us right.
PS Sanyang concluded by updating the National Assembly Select Committee on the roles and functions, stressing that some cases that are brought to their attentions have already been decided by the courts, which according to him, they have no say in what the courts have decided.
Ministry doesn't have the power and the authority to review a court judgment. We can only help judiciary to enforce a court ruling, but we cannot review a court case. So we always advise them, if you have an issue that is already adjudicated in the court and the judgment passed on, you can only go to a superior court to appeal. That is the only option left for you. But for us, we cannot do anything but only to help the judiciary to execute the court ruling.
Permanent Secretary Sanyang concluded that of the hottest and most pressing land problems in the country right now are even before the courts or judgment has already been passed by the courts, and that there are people involved who are unhappy with the judgment and take the law into their own hands. He appealed to Gambians to use the right channels in fighting to regain their land, saying even if the court rules against you, there is always the Court of Appeal of the Supreme Court to further your case or to liaise with the Select Committee on Lands rather than taking the law into your own hands. Reporting for QTV News, I am Aliou Cisse.
A representative from the Global Criminal Justice, who is also the US's ambassador at large for war crimes issues, has held talks on Wednesday with officials of the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights Violations on how to create an accountability mechanism to deal with those identified for prosecution by the TRRC. Omar P. Jallo attended the meeting and filed in this report.
Stephen Raab is in Banjul consulting with stakeholders on prosecuting crimes against humanity, torture and sexual violence in the Gambia during the previous regime. The renowned global prosecutor said when dealing with transitional justice, two things are very important. First is truth, which he said the TRRC can help achieve through its hearings. And the second is justice, where his intervention comes in, which involves the prosecution of those that committed the crimes identified as human rights violations. He stressed the need for political will of the Gambia government to ensure a victim-centered approach of transitional justice process in the post-Jammeh era.
Law is about protecting people. It's not about the powerful using it to oppress people, people using it to shake folks down, to show their power, to get folks to salute and bow and scrape. It's about protecting people, and if it doesn't do that, it's not doing the job. And a key part of that is holding offenders to account.
Srif Kijera, the chairperson of the Victims Center, stated that the creation of the center is born out of the desire for survivors of Jammeh's regime to come together to ensure that justice prevails for those who suffered from the 22 years of Jammeh's rule. He revealed that the center continues to serve as collaborators and facilitators between the government and the victims to ensure transitional justice and truth reconciliation.
The 1997 Constitution is quite problematic to try some of these cases. The TRRC is going to make recommendations on those that bears the greatest responsibility in atrocity crimes that have been committed during the Jammeh era. So, with the defeat of the promulgation bill of the draft constitution at the National Assembly, a great concern, in the expectation of the victims as far as post-TRRC prosecutions are concerned.
The president of the Gambia Bar Association, Saliu Tal, stressed the need for immediate prosecution mechanisms to be put in place for those identified for prosecution by the TRRC at the end of its mandate.
For example, the TRRC were to recommend prosecution. What kind of courts do you need to have? And where would this be? Do you need to have a local prosecution, a domestic prosecution as a Gambian court? Do you have to have an international, which could be outside, or do you have a hybrid, which is a mix of local and international elements? But in all of this, the purpose is to give Gambia the choice and the option, because it's a Gambian-led and owned process, and the victims are by and large Gambians. Of course, we have some other nationals involved, but it's important that to note that our purpose is to give the stakeholders the option to choose which way to go. It's not imposing any particular model.
Following the rejection of the new draft constitution bill by the National Assembly, it remains to be seen how to prosecute ex-President Jammeh and his aides for crimes of human rights violations under the 1997 Constitution, which appears to protect the APRC junta from prosecution. Reporting for QTV News, I am Omar P. Jallo.
We will go for a short commercial break, and when we come back, the news continues with some more local news stories. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. The Child Protection Alliance, in collaboration with the MAPSI, organized a forum on Thursday to discuss adopting positive discipline in everyday teaching, PDET, in the education curriculum as a subject. Ajibintu Drame reports.
This approach is to reorient and educate teachers to use alternative measures in disciplining students and improving their educational development. It also helps children succeed and gives them the information they need to learn and support their development. This will boost their confidence in active participation in their learning and respect children's rights. At the event, Lamin K. Saidi, Youth Coordinator Child Protection Alliance, says students should be well nurtured and protected by making the school a comfort zone. He also made mention of how corporal punishment causes emotional and psychological trauma to students, thereby hampering their education.
In that study, for children, it matters to them when a teacher looks at them and said, "You're this big head." I mean, the study really, revealed those issues that children felt so very bad about. We want them to find education to be a joyful, venture. They have stated this in the UN Global Study on Violence Against Children. So learning has to be exciting for children. That way, they will be the first to jump on bed and wake up mom to say, "Look, it's time for school."
Fanta Baji, Program Officer, Child Protection Alliance, says there is still a high prevalence of violence against children in the country, which include corporal punishment, FGM, and early marriage.
Social norms and values, including a culture of silence, pose a big challenge to the consistency of child protection services and weakens the child protection system. And there is a high number of people accepting the fact that it is a good method of disciplining students. The study reveals that 38% of children were beaten and 57% were subjected to other forms of humiliating punishment.
A study by Child Protection Alliance conducted in 2014 shows the majority of students are not in support of corporal punishments, as it has a negative impact on their education. The study also shows that students will stop going to school as a result of being subjected to such punishments by teachers. On the other hand, some teachers believe corporal punishment is ideal as it guides students to the path of education. Mariama Chow, Head of In-Service Education and Training at MOPSI, emphasized that corporal punishment should not be an option.
Some people still feel that children need to be beaten up, children need to be taken, put through certain, some sort of discomfort, hardship for them to behave, which at the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education we don't agree with. I personally, I don't really, and I want to believe that the heads of schools, governors, whoever it takes at school level should put all hands on deck. It shouldn't happen.
Saja A.K. Sanyang, the chairman, head teacher at Talinding Annex Lower Basic School, said the prevalence of corporal punishment in school has decreased over the years. He wishes PDET will be introduced in the curriculum and advise teachers to refrain from corporal punishments.
Yes, I will always intervene to ensure with the senior management team to ensure that teachers desist from corporal punishment. So if a teacher does it, he is reprimanded.
Corporal punishment is a punishment intended to cause physical pain to a person. It involves physical punishment such as caning, flogging, slapping, spanking and hitting with an object, amongst others. Corporal punishment in public schools were banned in 1914, but remained de facto commonplace until 1984, when a law banning all corporal punishment of minors, whether in schools or in home, was introduced. It remains to be seen whether PDET will finally bring an end to the practice. Ajibintu Drame, QTV News.
We will take another short break and we continue with international and sports news when we return. Welcome back. In international news, in a debate watched by millions of viewers, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris on Wednesday came face-to-face in what is the only scheduled vice presidential debate. QTV's Ansumana Isonyasi has been following, and he now reports.
Unlike the Trump and Biden debate, Wednesday's debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence was less openly hostile. This time, there were no endless interruptions requiring the moderator to intervene. However, Kamala Harris' most used phrase was a firm "I am speaking," delivered each time without looking at her interrupter. What this debate did provide was an insight into both campaigns ahead of next month's election. Separated by plexiglass barriers as protection from COVID-19, the two candidates met in Utah in what is the only planned vice presidential debate of the election. With President Trump's Democratic challenger Joe Biden leading the polls, the pressure was particularly on Pence to defend the Trump administration's record less than a week after the president tested positive for COVID-19 and less than a week after the president had shown little inclination to do anything other than harangue. The main highlights of Wednesday's debate centered on healthcare, coronavirus, the economy, the Supreme Court, amongst others. Commenting on the Trump administration's handling of the pandemic, Vice President Pence said the president cares about the lives of all Americans, citing Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China in the early stages of the outbreak as a clear manifestation of the president's commitment to containing the virus. However, Harris fired back, accusing the Trump administration of lying to the American people, pointing out more than once that Trump and Pence had known about the severity of coronavirus in January and that Trump had sought to downplay the virus. She said 210,000 people died in the USA in the last 7 months, with over 7 million contracting the disease, adding that over 30 million have also filed for unemployment in the last 7 months. She has also criticized Trump's quest to dismantle Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which prevents health companies turning away patients with pre-existing conditions. However, Pence responded, claiming the Trump administration has a plan to protect people with pre-existing conditions. However, Harris says President Trump has, since assuming power, spent years claiming he will release a comprehensive health care plan which is yet to be seen. In the previous election, Donald Trump had promised to repeal Obamacare on his first day in office. Kamala Harris was happy to point out that after 4 years in office, he has neither repealed it nor come up with its replacement. There have been many reactions to Wednesday's debate, but unlike the Trump-Biden showdown, many analysts expressed satisfaction with how both candidates had conducted themselves throughout the debate. At least one news outlet gave the verdict, this time America won. Ansumana Isonyasi for Qtv News.
As crimes against migrants continue to take a toll in Libya, a Nigerian man was soaked with petrol and burnt to death by some Libyan men.
According to the Libyan Interior Ministry, 3 men attacked a factory in Tripoli, soaked a Nigerian worker in petrol and set him on fire, while 3 other migrants suffered burns and were hospitalized. The United Nations described the case as another senseless crime against migrants in Libya. On Wednesday, Tripoli's Interior Minister said the suspects, who are all Libyan nationals, have been detained for the man's death. The ministry cited testimonies that shows the men attacking the factory and setting the Nigerian man on fire. Federico Soda, head of UN's International Organization of Migrant Mission in Libya, tweeted saying those responsible must be held accountable. Diana El Tahawi, Amnesty International's Group Deputy Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, said instead of being protected, migrants are met with a catalogue of appalling human rights abuses, adding that last month, Amnesty International released a report detailing horrific cycles of abuses of migrants in Libya, including unlawful killings, enforced disappearances, torture and rape. Despite this, even in 2020, the EU and its member states continue to implement policies trapping tens of thousands of men, women and children in an inhuman cycles of abuse, showing callous disregard for people's lives and dignity. The Nigerian worker's identity and reasons why he was burnt alive still remains unknown. Libya has been repeatedly accused of being a hostile environment for migrants and refugees, and many others who pass through the country in an attempt to reach safer destinations in Europe via the Mediterranean Sea. Many of these migrants are intercepted by European authorities and returned to Libya. The number of youths taking the perilous journey to the other parts of Europe is rising since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Italy has recorded 16,942 refugees in 2020. Babu Karsi, QTV News.
And in sports, barely a year into its existence, the manager of the Gambia amputee football team, Bob Jabi, says his team is aiming high to represent the country at regional, continental and global competitions. Momodu Gajaga reports.
For these amputees, losing a limb will never deter them from participating in sports. They formed a team thanks to Bob Jabi, a caregiver working for Legs for Africa, who brought them together. Holding a prosthetic leg, Bob told QTV that these amputees are able to do sports. The team was founded in February 2019 and since has been training regularly before taking a break due to the coronavirus pandemic. They had series of warm-up matches both locally and internationally. They won their first friendly match against Parasports team of Bignona in Casamas by 6-1. After resuming training, a friendly match with the Guinea-Bissau amputee team is being planned.
We are waiting authority, so we are waiting them to call. If they call us today, if there's any information we have, even tomorrow we will start our training.
The main challenge for the progress of sports in the Gambia is funding, and the Gambia amputee football team is no exception. Team manager Bob Jabi says their only support comes from Legs for Africa. Players and their manager often dig into their pockets to fund most of their training and matches.
Players, some of them are living in Kanifing, some of them are living in Lamen, some of them are living in Kerawan, Gunju, up to Karton. So I have to pick them to come to the football field.
With the team being newly formed and the sports in its infancy here, resources, infrastructure are big challenges which hopefully be overcome through local and international support. Momodu Gajaga, QTV News.
Ugandan runner Joshua has claimed his second amazing world record of the year on a night of stunning athletics feats, which also saw Ethiopia's Lete Sebet write herself into the record books at track meet in Valencia, Spain.
Track legend Kenenisa Bekele must be sick of hearing the name Joshua Cheptegei after the Ugandan rewrote the record books and removed another of Bekele's long-standing records from the record books. Cheptegei's run and time were phenomenal. He took an astonishing 6.53 seconds off one of the longest-standing track records in setting the new record of 26 minutes, 11 seconds. Bekele's 10,000 meters record had stood since 2005 and no one else had come close to matching it. This latest demolition of Bekele's record came 54 days after the same runner had removed the Ethiopian's 5,000 meters mark. On the 14th of August, he set a world 5,000 meters record of 12 minutes 35 seconds in Monaco. In 2017, the then 22-year-old Ugandan laid out his strategy for world domination and was seen as being cocky when he said, "My ambition is to dominate the track for the next 5 or 6 years. On current form, who will doubt him now? Before the fireworks from Cheptegei, another new track superstar, Ethiopia's Letesembet Gide, took center stage. Gide has only emerged in the last year or so as one to watch. However, her assured running and dismantling of the 5,000 meters record of her idol and compatriot track legend Tuenesta Baba was a sight to behold. She knocked 4 seconds off the mark of 14 minutes 11 seconds, which had stood since 2008. All in all, an eventful and unbelievable night of long-distance running. A great night for the two new record holders, and another great night for Africa. Momodu Gajaga, QTV News.
Before we end this bulletin, let's take a quick look at our main stories. President Adama Barrow today presided over the swearing-in of the newly appointed Minister of Youth and Sports, together with the new ombudsmen and 4 senior members of the judiciary. The Q Group Foundation, in support of a successful and safe reopening of schools, today handed over a check for $1 million to the Ministry of Education. The Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Lands told the National Assembly Select Committee on Local Government and Lands that his ministry has been involved in mediating between people involved in land issues, resulting in peaceful solutions. A representative from the Global Criminal Justice, who is also the US's ambassador at large for war crimes issues, has held talks with officials of the Victim Center on how to create accountability mechanism to deal with those identified for prosecution by the TRRC. In international news, in a debate watched by millions of viewers, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and his Democratic rival Kamala Harris on Wednesday came face to face in what is the only scheduled vice presidential debate. As crimes against migrants continue to take a toll in Libya, a Nigerian man was soaked with petrol and burnt to death by some Libyan men. And in sports, barely a year into its existence, the manager of the Gambia amputee football team, Bob Jabi, says his team is aiming high to represent the country at competitions. And Ugandan runner Joshua has claimed his second amazing world record of this year, which also saw Ethiopia's Lete Sembet write herself into the record books at a track meet in Spain. Following this news bulletin, we have a special report on the Q Group's donation of $1 million to the Ministry of Education. That's all we have for you in this bulletin. Join us at 10 for another bulletin. Thank you for watching.